Welcome to the show. Today I'm talking to a dear friend, a former colleague, and quite possibly my competition. Jeff Koinange has had an illustrious career as an anchorman, a journalist, and now a talk show host. They call him Africa's version of James Earl Jones because of that voice that has launched 1,000 networks. Jeff, it's great to have you here, man.
Great to see you, Salim.
Thank you very much for being on.
Thanks for having me,
Thank
man.
you, man. Have a seat.
Congratulations on your show.
Well, let's hope that it will actually be more than a pipe dream. I've never done this, so I'm a bit nervous today.
Good for you, man.
Because,
Listen,
I'm sitting next to the master.
you're sliding right into it perfectly, believe me.
So, Jeff, early years.
Early years, yeah.
You went to school here. You were born here.
Yep, absolutely. I born in a family of four. I'm the last born.
So the youngest, the spoilt one.
Not
No?
quite, not quite. I was born in January 7th, 1966 in Nairobi, born in Nairobi, but raised outside of Nairobi, a place called Kiambaa, right outside Kiambu town. And grew up mostly in a single family home because the day I turned 2 months old, my dad passed away. So I never knew him. I never knew my dad. So my mother, who was then 28, was left to raise a family of 4 kids on her own. You know, beautiful 28-year-old who could have remarried, but she didn't. She said, you know, the one thing I'm going to give my kids, she promised, was good education. And that's what she did. And in the beginning, we all went to Hospital Hill School, which was, you know, one of those experimental schools back in the 60s where they were trying to integrate blacks, Asians, and whites. That's where we went in the beginning. Later on, my brother and I switched and went to St. Mary's. So from Stand 5.
In Saints
Yeah.
is when you discovered your love for rugby.
Yes. Yeah,
Where you were one of the top rugby players.
well, you know, I wouldn't say, but thank you for that.
No, I heard. I used to be at Hillcrest, and you know, we always used to be very worried about it.
Did you actually play rugby?
I played rugby, yeah.
So yes, that's where I discovered my sporting abilities, and which is what I wanted to do from the start. I figured I wasn't that smart in class. I was okay, but I wasn't brilliant. So I figured, let me utilize these other talents that I have. So I played soccer, I played basketball, I played hockey, and of course rugby was the mainstay at St. Mary's.
Yeah.
So after St. Mary's, and again, you know, my mom couldn't afford to take me to college or pay for my university. So I was working in town, you know, in between jobs and stuff, and hoping to find out what I was going to do in the future. So I saw this ad in the paper, and it said, Pan Am, World Airways. Remember the airline?
Yeah.
They were looking for flight attendants, African flight attendants, for the very first time to fly their routes across Africa. That to us was an amazing opportunity because, look, come on, at 19, 20 years old, getting on an airline and flying, that was a dream in the 80s that one couldn't even fathom. So about 10,000 of us applied.
Wow.
10,000 people.
Just from around?
From Nairobi, yeah.
Oh, from Nairobi?
From Nairobi.
Wow.
And they were looking for 40.
Yeah.
So I applied and I forgot about it. And I figured, you know what, there's no way. 10,000 people, there's no way. Sure enough, a few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. You've been narrowed down. So they interviewed us. And a few days later, we got a confirmation. All 40 of us had been accepted and were going to fly to a place called Miami, Florida, at the Pan Am Flight Academy, place I had never heard of, never been on a plane outside Kenya. That was the first time, and most of the crew as well. So that was a dream. We landed in Miami. To cut a long story short, landed in Miami. It was an amazing time because it was February. And after we got all the orientation done, we took a walk on the beach, and we saw this amazing scene, you know, young kids in their Jeeps, in their convertibles, in skimpy clothing.
And that's when you decide I got to move to.
Yes, absolutely. But we asked the folks there, what's going on? I mean, what is this, a party or what? They said, no, this is spring break. We call it spring break. We didn't know what it was. But I tell you, Salim, that's exactly when I said, you know, I need to move here. I need to come to America.
So you did how many years at Pan Am?
I did about a year and a half, 18 months I worked in the airlines.
Flight attendant?
Absolutely. I mean, look, I used to do the announcements on the plane.
I don't. That doesn't surprise you. Do you remember them?
I do remember indeed. I mean, you get on the plane in Nairobi and everyone's settling in and you know, putting their bags above the whatever and below the seat. And I go up and say, ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Clipper Flight number 089 from Nairobi with continuing services to Lagos, Monrovia, and Dakar. All of us are trained in cabin safety. So we ask that you watch and listen carefully as we review the safety features of this Pan Am Boeing 747. You know, it's still in my head.
And do you still do that when you go fly now? Are you still tempted to go out there
Yes.
and actually go and do the announcement?
Very much, very much. But listen to this. So I used to do those announcements all the time, right? And literally 7 times out of 10, passengers would applaud. Like, oh man,
Love
is
the
that a
voice.
radio announcement? Oh, who is that? They say, that's that guy up there. And they'll say, listen, call him back. And they'd call me back. I mean, I'll go back after the service. And they said, listen, kid, because I was 19, 20 years old. They said, listen, kid, you need to do something with that voice, man. You've got a talent and you don't even know it. One day you're going to make money from it. And I laughed. I said, but listen, I'm just joking. I'm just having fun. After enough people told me, I figured, you know what? Maybe there is some truth to it. So I started applying to colleges. And I ended up in New York. First, I went to a community college in Brooklyn, New York. Community colleges are 2-year colleges where, you know, if you don't have enough money to pay, and people know this, you can pay, you know, you can get a 2-year degree. And then from there, if your grades are good enough, you can transfer to a 4-year degree.
Right.
And then, you know...
and were your grades good enough?
I got a 4.0 GPA.
Fantastic.
And that was enough to transfer my credits to NYU, New York University, which is one of the best colleges for broadcasting in America in terms of name. So I got accepted and I finished my degree there. But then at the same time, NYU gave me access. I got to do an internship at ABC News, NBC News. I got to do another internship at CNN. Back then it was a tiny little cable network in New York, you remember? But it was the access, getting to know what journalism was like in America.
And who were some of the people that inspired you there, that you looked up to? When you
Oh man, look, at the time, you were overseas at the time, so there were 3 big names in American broadcasting. There was Peter Jennings, of course, ABC News, who wasn't American, by the way, right? He was Canadian. Yeah. And then there was Dan Rather at CBS and Tom Brokaw at NBC News. And then there was a show in the morning on NBC News called The Today Show. Its host was an African-American called Bryant Gumbel. Great guy. I mean, he was so confident, he knew his stuff, and I loved the way he used to present that show. So I would look at these people and say, my goodness, will I ever get to that stage? Will I ever get there? First of all, I'm not even American. They think I speak funny over here. They think, you know, I don't quite fit into their scheme of things. And that's why I started thinking, am I going to stay in America the rest of my life? Or am I going to go back home and tell the story of my people? 2 incidents helped me along the way. One, Black Hawk Down in Somalia. You remember it very well. When the Somalis, you know, brought down those choppers and killed 18 special forces and rangers. That story was reported immensely in America. It was wall-to-wall coverage, right? A few months later, genocide happened in Rwanda, unfolding. It got very little mention in the US. Maybe because everyone was rushing to South Africa at the time because Nelson Mandela was being inaugurated as president, or maybe because they didn't care about a little country called Rwanda where close to 1 million people were slaughtered. And I figured, you know what? Maybe these people are misinformed. Maybe someone needs to be on the ground to tell that story. And I had heard of a guy who had told a story about a famine in Ethiopia in '84.
Really? Who's that guy?
and he brought the world to Ethiopia.
Have I heard of this?
Absolutely, man. Mo Amin. So what I did is I wrote to him. Those days it was faxes and letters. Yeah. I wrote to Mo and I said, listen, man, I'm so-and-so. I'm in America. I've been here, da-da-da-da. I want to come work for you. I know about you. I know what you've done. And I know you would love for Africans to tell the African story. Immediately, he sent me a fax right back. He said, Jeff, pack up your bags. Come back to Kenya. There's a place for you right here. And in essence, that's what I did.
And that was Africa Journal.
Correct. He was starting this new magazine program. Yes. And he said, you're going to come be one of my guys.
And so you came here and you started Africa Journal. Yeah. You started working with Africa
Correct.
Journal.
And he was a great guy, man.
But Africa Journal didn't last that long under him.
Correct.
There was that whole dispute with Reuters and the problems that were going on.
Yeah.
And then after he died, you continued with Africa Journal, but wanted to go on to South Africa and with Reuters as an entity.
Absolutely. And in fact, after 3 years with Africa Journal, Reuters decided to send me first to West Africa. Abidjan was where they had a big bureau. So in '98, they sent me to Abidjan. And I was supposed to be there for 3-4 years. But we did an amazing story. It was when the whole of West Africa was crumbling down. Liberia, Sierra Leone, Guinea, they were all literally coming undone. And we covered Sierra Leone immensely a few months later. And we got some exclusive coverage for Reuters. And I thought, you know what, this is a great This is a great introduction to West Africa. I'm loving this place. We're going to stay here for a while. However, things were not to be because the guy who was running the show in South Africa television, Jimmy Matthews, our friend, he quit. And Reuters asked me, would you like to relocate to South Africa? I said, I just arrived in West Africa. I'm just getting used to it. They said, you know what? We need a good man in South Africa. There's elections coming up. There's all kinds of issues coming up. We want you in South Africa. So literally 6 months after I arrived in Abidjan, I was shipped out to South Africa.
And then came a big break that put you on television, and we'll talk about that right after this break. Welcome back. I'm here with renowned journalist Jeff Koinange. We're just talking about his move to CNN. This is CNN.
Correct.
Please. You gotta say it.
You do have to say it?
You gotta say it.
This is CNN.
There we go. Now, why didn't they use you as opposed to James Earl Jones?
Because he's got a richer voice. I always wanted to say that, by the way. Always. Even when I applied to work for them, thanks to a good friend of mine who told me that they were looking for people to open up a bureau in Nigeria. You remember that?
I remember that. I remember that.
You told me, listen, these guys are looking for somebody.
It was, for them, the concept of having an African covering Africa was completely like, they were like, wow, that might be a good idea.
And it was foreign before, wasn't it?
It was so obvious to us that they needed African journalists covering the continent. And you were the first and the trailblazer on that. But CNN ended up being a bittersweet experience for you. I mean, you had a great 3 or 4 years. 6 years.
Yeah, a good run. It was a great run.
You did some fantastic stories.
Good stories, thank you, Charles Taylor, 2003.
You were everywhere, Jeff. I remember watching your stories, and I mean, living in Nigeria couldn't have been easy either, especially with the family and you being away for so long. But then, there was the Niger Delta story that pretty much, messed up your career with CNN.
Absolutely.
On unfounded allegations.
But you know what? Looking back, and people ask me, if you were to do it again, would you change anything? I said, not a thing. Because that story, which looked like a Hollywood movie, I still look at it today, and it looked like it was an amazing, amazing movie. I had been doing research on that for like a year and change, for like 14 months, calling these people, trying to gain their trust, telling them, we want to come and tell your story. And they would refuse. For a year and change, they would refuse. Finally, we got a call to go in. And when you're called to go in, you always have to check with your people. Checked with Atlanta. They said, okay, just be careful. We weren't sent with any security or anything. I had 2 people with me. I had my cameraman and I had a stills photographer. Flew down to Warri in the Delta area. These rebels came, picked us up. We drove into the creeks for about, in the boat for like an hour and a half. While we were driving in there, while we were in the boat, these guys approached us from the other side, and they started shooting at us.
And these were who?
Fellow rebels.
Oh, okay.
They were fellow guys from these.
From their
but apparently, the word, they hadn't communicated that we were coming.
So these guys thought they were somebody else.
Yeah, so not RPGs, rocket propelled grenade, 50 caliber, they were shooting at us, and you could see it in the water. And I said, you know what? We're going to die now. And I told my cameraman, I said, listen,
keep rolling.
Nick, just keep rolling, because if I'm going to die, I want to die on air, on camera. And Salim, looking back, I mean, they could have killed us and dumped our bodies in the creeks, and that would have been it. Would have been a headline for 24 hours, and after that, forgotten. But then they approached us, and we showed our IDs, and we said, we're here, we've been given permission. And they gave us a lecture for like 15 minutes, and then they said, okay, follow us. And again, for another hour and a half, in the creeks, boom, 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 finally ended up at this place. Where these guys, we found them in a little enclosure, chanting and firing their guns. And then they cleared the way, and we found these hostages, these guys, sailors, who were in dungarees, sitting there, about 24 of them.
These were
the Filipino sailors who had been hijacked about a month earlier and brought here. Nobody knew about them. Nobody had communicated with Abuja or Manila, for that matter. Nobody knew anything about them.
CNN accused, or you were accused, not by CNN, you were accused by the Nigerian government of staging.
Yeah, stage managing, correct.
And now, where did you find these Filipino
Yeah,
sailors
yeah.
to stage
Yeah, yeah.
kidnap them? I mean,
Yeah.
these were guys who obviously had been kidnapped.
And we interviewed them.
And they said
they were
talked
crying.
about their
They were
ordeal.
crying. They wanted to go home. They said, please tell the world we're here. We're not against the Nigerian government or against the rebels. We're just doing our work.
Did the CNN give you an opportunity to tell your side of the story to management?
They did, absolutely. And look, let's face it, the Nigerians were left with a lot of egg on their face. The embarrassment from Manila and the diplomatic back and forth. And by the way, 48 hours after the story aired, all the 24 Filipinos were released by the rebels. They were brought to Port Harcourt. They were put on a special charter, flown back to Manila. So at least something good came out of that story. But yes, I had time to explain this. And what CNN had a problem with is that, or the Nigerians, was that the story was one-sided. We didn't get a Nigerian point of view, which we had gone to Abuja, flown there, and waited 5 days to get a comment from the government.
And with these kinds of stories, you can't wait.
No.
That long. This is exclusive stuff.
Correct.
You can't wait. The
Yeah.
story is going to get stale.
Yeah.
The news is current.
Correct.
It is news.
Correct. News gets old fast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so why then the leaving from CNN?
We were at that point where it was time to part company.
Do you think they treat us differently because we're from Africa and therefore, we are dispensable?
Yeah. I think you've answered your own question.
Look, is that how you? Because I would have felt that.
We are expendable. And you mentioned earlier on the kinds of stories I used to do, covering places where nobody would dare cover, going into the front lines and not even thinking about the risk to myself. And we used to go out and get exclusives, not thinking. I mean, looking back at some of the stories I did, I would say today, was I crazy? Doing those things, dodging bullets, child soldiers in Liberia, Sierra Leone, and that part. Those were tough stories to do. But at the end of the day, yeah, we are expendable. We are.
We're going to talk about the future and what's next for Jeff Koinange when we come back. Welcome back. We're still with Jeff. We've been talking about his illustrious career to date, but there's still a big future. There's a new book coming out. And I have the advanced copy.
You do indeed.
Yeah?
Yeah.
It's called Through My African Eyes. Now,
That's
this is
right.
not your first book.
No, it's not.
You wrote about your grandfather.
Correct. But you can show them the picture. Feel free to show
There
them.
you go.
There you
Through
go.
My African
Yeah.
Eyes.
Yeah.
Of course, it's got Jeff on the cover. I would expect nothing less than having Jeff on the cover. Right?
Yes.
So this is coming out shortly.
Correct.
It's coming soon. Isn't it a bit early to write a bio? It's effectively a bio of your experiences.
Absolutely.
Aren't you a bit young to do it? I mean, usually people write at the end of their careers.
Yes.
You're not thinking about retiring.
Good point. No, I'm not. Not at all, Salim. But you know what? I've been so fortunate to have that front row seat. Not very few of us will ever have that front row seat. Take it from me. To be able to cover wars and famines and breaking news and hurricanes and this and that, very few will ever have that opportunity, especially in Africa. In Kenya, people would love to hear about these stories. I had that front row seat. And I think, and it's taken me 7 years to write this book, by the way. And I talk about the experiences, hoping I can inspire people. People who want to get into this business for the right reasons. Not for fame, not for glory, not for fortune. That's not what journalism is about.
Oh, fortune, definitely not. We figured that one out a while ago. Yeah, a bit too late.
Unless you're Salim, but...
I wish.
But if you want to get into this business for the right reasons, that's number one. Two, that if you're going to be a journalist, there's two things you have to remember. And I give the advice in this book later on. I say, look, what we've been talking about throughout, no story is worth dying for, and you're only as good as your last story. Those two very valuable lessons. But the African story has to be told by Africans. Your father told me that. There are not enough of us telling our own story. If I could just write about my experiences, what I saw, what I felt, what I experienced, hopefully others can write their own.
Because I think it's very important for young African journalists to understand that we still are starting off at a disadvantage in this world of journalism. Because we are seen as being inferior. We are made to feel that way, that we're not as good as the people that have come from overseas. But actually, I think we're better. And we've proven that we are better. But it's very important, those experiences. So have you been honest in this
I've been
book?
brutally honest, Salim, brutally honest, and called it like it is. Whether we're covering stories with people like Anderson Cooper or Brent Sadler, senior correspondents, and being put on the same level with them, and being and pressure being put on us to perform as well. And you're right, we are as good, if not better, especially at telling our own stories. And that's what Africans need to understand. Nobody else can tell our story better than us.
Have you talked about your hair? Because for the follically challenged like myself,
Yes.
hair is a big topic.
Sure.
But your hair has been the subject of numerous blogs, tweets. It was even the subject of, former head of CNN, Chris Kramer, calling me up and saying, please tell Koinange to get rid of the braids.
Did he tell you that?
Yeah, he did. He
You
said,
never told me.
No, I never. I said,
I thought they liked them.
I can't talk to a man about his hair, I can't tell him to change it because, I'd love to have braids if I had.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
no, I mean, in all seriousness, image is very important.
Images,
I mean,
yeah.
it's extremely important.
Yeah,
It's been
yeah.
very important to you.
Yeah.
And almost many people have followed your career based on your hairstyles.
Imagine
and,
that.
And trying to see what you're going to come up with next.
Yeah. I wore those braids for a story I did in Kilimanjaro. We climbed Kilimanjaro to do a story that we were assigned to, and we're going to be up there for, 4.5 days up, 1.5 days down. And, I couldn't have hair like this over there, so I decided, let me just put some braids. And that's how it started. And nobody at CNN ever challenged or told me anything. This is the first time I'm hearing about
they
Kramer.
actually, I got a call from Kramer saying, please, can you tell Koinange to get rid of those braids?
But a lot of people love those braids. They still ask me today, what happened to your braids?
That's why I didn't say anything. I love them too. Jeff, if you could do it all again,
Yeah.
if you had a chance to go back and do do things again,
Yeah.
would you do anything differently? And in every aspect of your life, not just your career.
Yeah.
Every aspect of your life. Would you do anything differently?
Look, I've spilled my heart in this book. I call this my, for lack of a better phrase, this is my dreams from my father moment, where I spill my heart all on this book. Talk about growing up. Talk about going to school. Talk about being bullied in St. Mary's. Everything that's interconnected, all the way to becoming a journalist and working for the big networks, coming back, helping start this network that nobody knew about called K24, starting a talk show that I decided I would do every single day of the week because we had none of that in Kenya. It's all been a journey, and I'm always learning. I'm always, I'm not the best, I'm not the expert, I'm not the be-all and end-all, but I'm willing to learn, and I'm willing to impart as I go along. Would I do anything different here? Not a single bit, Salim. And there's still more coming, by the way. This is just the first part. This is the first half century, if you will.
That was my next question, is that, so what's next for Jeff Koinange?
Yeah. There is not a single Africa-wide, Africa-owned network. We have to do that at some point. Otherwise, we will have to, contend with our stories being told for us. People parachuting in, telling the story, and parachuting right out with no thoughts or no feelings on the story itself.
Once we talked about politics,
Yeah.
I mean, can I see the slogan Jeff Koinange for president sometime soon?
Oh, we already have a president.
Not president for life. And you're still young, so I'm hoping that one day, is that something that you have any ambition
Who's
for?
going to vote for me, man?
I would vote for you.
Well, at least I got one vote.
No, I would vote for you. You have a lot to offer, Jeff. And this is, I've always found this is one of the things that talking to young African leaders, and you are a leader in your field and on the continent, not enough young Africans are taking that responsibility of saying, I want to go into public life where I can make a difference. You have the skills, the education, the knowledge, and the exposure to the rest of the world to actually be very beneficial to government.
Sure.
I think. But
Maybe this journey all along has been towards something. I don't know what the end result will be, but maybe what I've gone through in the last 48 years, you just never know, Salim. I mean, look, is that my camera there?
Yeah.
Jeff Koinange for president.
Yeah. Sounds good, huh?
Stay tuned.
Jeff Koinange, ladies and gentlemen. And there you have the scoop directly from Jeff Koinange. Through My African Eyes, Jeff's new book coming out soon. Make sure you pick it up at the nearest bookshop. It's a great, great read. Join us next week for a chat with yet another great African personality. From me and the entire crew of The Scoop from the West House Hotel here in Nairobi, thanks for joining us.